Hello and welcome to PressTV News Analysis. I'm Kaveh Tafai. Bahrain and Saudi Arabia have been invited to the UK's largest arms fair this week, in spite of the two countries' roles in suppressing anti-regime protest. Bahrain, 8 months on, our focus in this edition of PressTV News Analysis.
The popular uprising continues in Bahrain, and the forces of the Al Khalifa regime continue their brutal crackdown on the protests. The oppressive tactics have failed to end the protests, which have been continuing on a daily basis. Both the protests and the crackdown escalated after King Hamad bin Isa Al Khalifa declared last month that God does not tolerate the way the regime has dealt with the demonstrators. The Bahraini people have paid dearly for their revolution. Dozens have lost their lives, hundreds have been put in jails and tortured. The detainees include human rights activists and highly skilled medical staff incarcerated for treating injured protesters. Some of those arrested have died under torture while in custody. Saudi Arabia stands accused of complicity with the Bahraini regime. Riyadh sent troops to the Persian Gulf Sheikhdom to crush the uprising. The West has also been accused of turning a blind eye to the situation in Bahrain while it clamors about violations in other parts of the world. However, Bahrainis are pressing ahead with their uprising regardless. Many observers believe the wave of Islamic awakening that began in North Africa will bring down the Western-backed regimes in the Persian Gulf region.
Our guest for this edition of the News Analysis from Beirut, we have Mohsen Saleh joining us. He's a professor at the Lebanese University. And we have from Washington, Ali Al-Ahmad. He's the director of IGA joining us. Gentlemen, thank you both. Ali Al-Ahmad, let me get an idea from you. While uprisings in other North African, Middle Eastern countries are taking place, why do you think Bahrain has received the least amount of attention?
Well, it has received the least amount of attention because the U.S. and the Western countries do not support the people of Bahrain and their revolution. It's very simple that they are not in favor of this revolution. And the same thing, the same situation is in Yemen. You don't hear much about it, despite the fact that the number of people who have been killed and the intensity of the protests and so on. This shows you, or this speaks to the level of bigotry and how the West is willing to depart from its public statements on democracy and human rights in favor of relationship. And of course, this is a misguided policy to think that they can ignore the people of Bahrain and Yemen and continue to support falling regimes, because this will come back to haunt them again. This is what happened in Iran in 1979, and it's happening in Egypt and Tunisia. This is unfortunate. I think the policymakers in the West have made a huge miscalculation in their opposition to the popular revolutions in the Middle East.
And in terms of this miscalculation, to use your words, Mohsen Saleh, let me ask you, how far is perhaps a suppression going on from Western organizations? Let's look as an example in terms of the media professionals and the assaults that they have experienced. Recently, a Reuters reporter was shot by rubber bullets. There was an incident with the New York Times reporter. He was shot at from a helicopter. The forceful deporting of a CNN reporter, and the examples just keep going on and on. Media professionals are under attack. So are they being exerted restrictions?
Well, it shows to what extent the Western media and also the Western humanitarian organizations are really committed to the human cause. And I guess they have not only blind eye the international organizations like the United Nations. When Ban Ki-moon talks a lot about Syria and talks a lot about the issues of terrorism, and he does not look at the terrorist attacks on the Bahraini people, and cannot allow people like, for example, the international organizations from the communities of the Arabs, or from Iran or from Europe, to go and see in their eyes the problems, and they should send a real and credible groups to watch what's happening in Bahrain. And I guess the Western voices who really work for human rights and work for their freedom of speech and freedom of human being now in these atrocities in Bahrain, I guess they should work a lot in order to fill the gap that they have been really done for a long time. About 8 months, as you have mentioned and your report mentioned, these people in Bahrain have been tortured, atrocities committed, hospitals closed, and students in the universities and high schools been taken and imprisoned and tortured, and poets and literary men and all these people. And I guess they are doing more massacres in Bahrain, more than what has happened in Yemen or in Cairo or in Tunisia. And still we see like the Saudis, Al Jazeera and BBC and also Al Arabiya, all these channels are concentrating on what's happening in Syria. Why they are blind eye look at Bahrain. And I guess it's about time for this what's so-called royal family to stop these atrocities and attack on human rights and people in Bahrain. And I guess the majority, let them go for referendum. Let the United States talk about the human rights, and they were yesterday talking about terrorism and all this. What about the terrorist attacks on the Bahraini people? They don't look at the Bahrainis as if they are not a human being. What's happening in the United Nations? This is not a United Nation. This is a United Superpowers like European vetoes and the United States and other places. I guess the people of Bahrain have fed up with these atrocities, and I guess nobody can break their will, and they are continuing in their march for their freedom and justice.
Right.
And I guess it's about time for the Arab revolutions also to commit themselves to these people, not to.
Well, why haven't they? Since you brought that up now, why haven't Arab nations come out? What about the Arab League? Why isn't Mr. Al-Arabi in Bahrain talking to the government there when it has exerted itself in other countries? Most notably, we saw in Syria. I mean, again, let's look at where there should be solidarity and where it's not coming from. We could mention some Arab countries. Why is that?
Yeah, that's true. I guess it's about time for Egypt and for Iraq and for also Syria and all these people who really committed for human rights and for freedom against Zionism, against imperialism, and against these what so-called real kingdoms. They are, in fact, they are bases, military bases for the United States and for colonizations. They are representing the Zionist interests in Bahrain and in the Gulf. They are not representing the interests of their people, and they have been put and placed on these people, and people cannot tolerate them anymore. The king talks about not tolerating these demonstrations. People, I guess, they are fed up with this regime, and I guess the Arab League now, they have responsibility and duty and task to raise their voice in order to stop these atrocities in Bahrain.
Okay,
and
let me bring him Ali Al-Ahmad. Thank you for that, Mohsen Saleh. Ali Al-Ahmad, let me get an idea from you why it is. Well, let's look at the GCC, the Persian Gulf countries. I mean, they just recently held a meeting in Saudi Arabia, and they reaffirmed their alliance with the government there in Bahrain and the steps that have been taken, even in terms of the security situation getting better there. But what are they afraid of if they were to voice opposition? Because some critics are saying they can't voice opposition. They're afraid within their own countries, if concessions were made, that therefore there has to be changes within their own governments. Is that something that's true? Do you agree with those critics?
All the GCC countries, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Kuwait, Bahrain, UAE, and Oman, they are ruled by ruling families that are corrupt, that have expropriated the country and the wealth and power of those countries, and the population have no say whatsoever in the political process or in the economic resources that is in these countries. So they do not want to see any one of them, this gang of six, to lose power, to change. It's okay if one is replaced by another one, but it is a red line for them to give back the power to the people. And they are adamant in this situation. Take Qatar and Bahrain, for example, who are rivals. But when it comes to the fact that the Al Khalifa and Al Thani are united against any change in status where one of the ruling families will lose its power. So this is something that's a pact that they have, and they are afraid of their people, absolutely. They are afraid, and they will use every possible mean to stay in power, including dividing the population, fomenting hatred within the population, and blaming Iran or even Israel or Syria or Egypt for their problems.
Well, let me ask you, Ali Al-Ahmed, how close do you think that the Al Khalifa regime in Bahrain is to losing its power, that is making these Persian Gulf countries feel the way they do?
I think the Al Khalifa right now are losing much of their power and influence, because Bahrain is becoming like a Saudi territory. The power is not anymore in the hand of Al Khalifa. They have very little power. Their legitimacy within the population has been zero. The people have cleared their mind and realized that there is the only way to progress in Bahrain is to remove the Al Khalifa, and that is something Al Khalifa have lost and threw away any type of legitimacy. Of course, they have support within segment of the population, but that support is dwindling at itself. The only support that they have now is from countries like Saudi Arabia and the United States, and of course the UK and other Western countries, and that is going to change in the next few months, I believe, because when the West realizes that the Al Khalifa ship is sinking, they will push them away, and I anticipate that will happen within this year or early next year.
Okay, Mohsen Saleh, let's switch gears. Let's look at a recent development. It's an exhibition that's going to be held actually on Tuesday in London. It's UK's largest arms fair, and guess what? Both Bahrain and Saudi Arabia have been invited to this. Keeping in mind that this decision for the invitation was made by the Foreign and Commonwealth Office of the UK. Saudi Arabia and Bahrain obviously both have been accused of using weapons to suppress anti-regime protests. What does that show?
Well, that shows a little blow for what kind of shying from what's happening in Bahrain and what's happening in Saudi Arabia. The Western media and the Western politicians, they have been trying to say, well, we are helping people to raise their voice and get justice and get development and democracy and freedom and all these slogans, empty slogans, when it comes to the Arab and Islamic world. When it comes to would they go to the international court and really try these people for their atrocities? Would they ask the Saudis and the Bahrainis to stop their atrocities against their people in the western part of the Arabian Peninsula and Bahrain? Would they really put, for example, a boycott on oil military arms or all these things, or they talk in a fierce language that you should stop these atrocities against people. These are media, I guess, propaganda in order to say, well, we are talking about these issues. But I guess they are doing from underground, they are doing what they should be ashamed of, such acts and such actions and such sayings, and they really encourage Saudi Arabia and the states there, well, the semi-states, well, they are not states in the Persian Gulf, to go into Bahrain and try to punish these innocent people who are going to the streets to express their freedom, their way of thinking, their way of talking. And I guess it's about now to understand what kind of culture and civilization the West has, and what kind of culture the Americans have about the East and about the Islamic culture. And I guess Obama was wrong when he said there are no more wars with Islam. Now this would really go to the old saying, or the also modern saying by Huntington and others. It's a clash between civilizations, and I should say it should be a clash between values. The Islamic values should be put on the way, and saying, well, where is democracy? Where is the freedom? Where is it in Iraq? Where is it in Afghanistan? And where is it in other places? In Libya, when they invaded and conquered Libya by this kind of force, killing more than 30,000 civilians in Libya, and now they are to exploit the oil of Libya and putting this what so-called puppets in other places in the Saudis and in the Gulf states.
Let's open up the U.S.'s role here more. So let me bring in Ali Al-Ahmad. Ali Al-Ahmad, let me ask you, the U.S. president, let's look at some of the statements, because we're trying to figure out the posturing they're having, because now the line is at least blurred, if it hasn't gone back, are their ideals of upholding democracy. President Obama a month ago, mass arrests and brute force are at odds with the universal rights of Bahrain's citizens. Then video footage has emerged that poisonous tear gas grenades that were used against demonstrators were supplied by the Americans. That's one example I'd like to get your reaction on, and I'd like to get a flashback on the visit of the then U.S. Defense Secretary Robert Gates, because the role of the U.S. is in question. Did the United States give that okay when he was there one day prior to the Saudis going into Bahraini soil? Tell us the role overall, these two examples of how the U.S., the part they have played.
The U.S. had prior knowledge of the Saudi invasion of Bahrain. There is no question about it. And I challenge anyone
prior knowledge in what sense?
Says
prior
otherwise.
Knowledge that Saudi Arabia said we're going to go in? That's just information?
Yes.
Or that it was in cooperation and the U.S. saying, yes, do go ahead? Because there's a slight bit of difference that does make a huge difference in terms of what has transpired 4 or 5 months, if not more, of Saudi presence.
They were informed, and they agreed to it. And that was, a simple evidence of that the U.S. Fifth Fleet did not go and alert when Saudi troops invaded Bahrain. It's a very common, traditional, classical response to in the U.S. military code of conduct, that if an armed force that is even friendly armed force that suddenly shows up in the territory that you are protecting or you are covering, you go and alert. So that did not happen, because they did have prior knowledge and approval of that invasion. And in regards to the President Obama's statements, they are just statements. They are really smoke screens. The real policy of the United States has been to support the Al Khalifa monarchy and the other Gulf monarchies against their domestic challengers, political opposition, democratic opposition, human rights opposition, you name it. I'm not talking about the external, foes. I'm talking about popular, democratic people, either in Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Qatar, and in Bahrain. So the policy remains the same. It has not changed. Whatever they are saying in public is really because the American media, and they have been criticizing the Obama administration, and they are trying to maintain, the Obama administration is trying to maintain some face for the public in the United States, because the people in the United States do not agree on such policy. So they are secretly supporting the Al Khalifa monarchy. They just renewed the treaty between the United States and Bahrain. They continue to supply Bahrain with weapons that are used against the population and causing death and injuries to young men and women, and other civilians. So the policy remains the same. This past week, a delegation of some Bahraini politicians came to the United States to meet with American officials. Very minor officials met with them. They were not given the time of day, as we say in the United States. So the voice of the people of Bahrain was not welcome by the United States State Department and White House, and they were pressured to participate in these illegal elections that are coming up in Bahrain. So you are seeing the policy is very clear. It's support to the monarchy, and the position is hostility to the people of Bahrain, and it has not changed. The UK has the same policy.
Right. Mohsen Saleh, let's talk again Saudi Arabia's role here. They are present in Bahrain. They have called this an occupation. Their violent crackdown a form of collective punishment. Usually these descriptors are attributed to Israel's siege of the Gaza Strip. Is this the reality in Bahrain? If so, for how much longer will this continue?
Well, I guess the people of Bahrain will continue to demonstrate, to raise their voice, to ask for their needs, and I guess they won't stop. And no force on the earth could stop people who have this right in order to achieve it and say it clearly and obviously on the air in the whole world until they achieve this goal. I guess the Saudis and the Bahraini security external forces, not Bahraini people, not from Bahrain. I guess they are using mercenaries from Africa, from anywhere, I don't know, in order to put down this revolution. The Gulf states should be shameful of themselves, of their interference in Bahrain, and I guess the time will come soon, because people in Bahrain and in Saudi Arabia and in other states in this area would stand for their right for living, and I guess the Saudis and the Bahrainis and the people around this area, from Baghdad, from also other areas, I guess will influence the situation, and I guess the United States will be defeated in this area, and it's about time for the United States also to pull out from Bahrain and from Iraq. After the withdrawal of the United States from Iraq, I guess we will have another talk, and I guess we will see it soon.
Okay, thank you very much, Mohsen Saleh, professor at the Lebanese University. Thank you for your statements. He was in Beirut, and from Washington we had Ali Al-Ahmed. Thank you. He's the director of the IGA. And of course, you, the viewer, for watching. We do appreciate it. Do send us any questions or comments you may have. Newsroom@presstv.ir. That's our email address. It's the old-fashioned way. From me, Kaveh Tafway, and the entire team, it's goodbye.